A man of 63 years, a veteran, entered a bank with the intention of opening an account. Within minutes, law enforcement surrounded him. The woman behind the counter did not yet realize who would soon appear through the door next. Raymond Ellis possessed a presence that made others take notice, not due to any loud or flashy behavior, but because of a calm strength in his movements. At 63, his posture remained upright, his shoulders confident, and his steps purposeful. Years spent serving in the United States Army had ingrained discipline into every part of him. However, on that particular morning, as he crossed the threshold of Heritage Bank located in a Charlotte suburb, his mind was clear of military matters. He simply wished to open a checking account. The time was approximately 9 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday. The rain earlier had left a faint glow on the pavement outside, and inside the bank a peaceful quiet prevailed. Raymond was dressed modestly in a navy windbreaker, denim trousers, and spotless brown walking shoes. He clutched a small folder under his arm, plain yet sufficient to carry his Veterans Affairs papers, discharge documents, and military identification. A few months prior, he had completed this same procedure for his cousin residing in Tallahassee without any difficulties, so he anticipated this appointment would proceed just as easily. The woman greeting customers, likely in her 20s, offered him a brief friendly smile and indicated toward one of the office spaces enclosed by glass walls. She kindly informed him that someone would attend to him shortly. Raymond replied with gratitude and took a seat, placing the folder gently on his lap. He looked around. A young mother was filling out forms at a side counter. A man wearing work boots stood near the small hut, and a woman in the back spoke quietly on her phone. Just an ordinary morning. After about 10 minutes, a voice called, "Mr. Ellis." He stood and walked over to meet Melissa Cross for the first time. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, wearing a stiff navy suit, her blonde hair pulled back tightly, and her lips pressed together as if she only smiled when necessary. Her handshake was brief and firm. "This way, please," she said, indicating her office. Raymond followed and took a seat opposite her at a desk that looked hardly used. She opened a folder without looking up and said, "So you are here to open a new account today?" "Yes, ma'am," Raymond replied, handing her the documents. "A checking account, maybe savings as well, depending on the conditions." She glanced at the folder but did not touch it. "What brings you to this branch?" she asked. "I recently moved closer to my daughter and her children. She lives off Sardis Road. I figured I should switch to a local bank rather than keeping everything in Florida." Melissa finally picked up the papers and began browsing through them. Her expression changed just slightly, a narrowing of her eyes and a faint pressing of her lips. "You say this is your military ID?" she asked, holding it up carefully. "Yes, ma'am," Raymond confirmed. "And this is your discharge form, DD-218? "That is correct." She gazed at him for a moment longer than necessary and asked, "May I know why you are not using USA or Navy Federal? Most veterans choose them." Raymond blinked and replied, "This branch is only 5 minutes away from my daughter's home, and I prefer to support a local bank." His voice remained steady, but there was something about her question that unsettled him. He had already explained himself, so why did she continue to look at him as if he did not belong there? She offered a faint smile that failed to reach her eyes and stood up. "Give me just a minute to check something," she said without waiting for his reply, and walked out, a folder in her hand. Raymond sat quietly, watching her through the glass as she stood beside a computer near the reception area. She was not searching for anything on the screen, but seemed to be speaking softly with another staff member. Occasionally, she glanced back in his direction. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He sensed now that odd feeling that something was wrong. Not a mere misunderstanding or a simple delay, but something else entirely. He knew when he was being closely examined. His years in service had trained him to read people. And Melissa Cross was not acting uncertain. Melissa Cross did not believe she had any issues with veterans. On the contrary, she convinced herself that she admired them. Her father had served, after all. She even contributed to a military charity annually during tax season. Yet, in that moment, standing by the terminal with Raymond's folder in hand, none of those thoughts came to her mind. She found herself wondering why something felt off about the man sitting in her office. He was neither loud nor impolite, yet her mind had formed a quick judgment the moment he entered clothed in a windbreaker. The folder he carried appeared worn beyond normal, and his calm voice strangely annoyed her. There was an undefinable sense that made her feel guarded. Perhaps it was intuition, or maybe habit. Having worked at this branch for 6 years, She had encountered plenty of unusual behavior. She took pride in her ability to read situations, and within moments, she had concluded that Raymond Ellis seemed unlikely to have legitimate documents. As she moved away from him, her mind was not scanning databases, but relying on her instincts that called for action. "I have a suspicious person trying to open an account," she quietly told the emergency operator. "There might be forged military papers. Something's not right. Please dispatch someone." Without hesitation or second thoughts, she made that call. Meanwhile, Raymond had already noticed the change in atmosphere. He had experienced this reaction often before, when people stopped listening and jumped to conclusions. When the police vehicles arrived, Melissa Cross returned to the room with a steady expression, carefully avoiding direct eye contact. Sitting behind her desk, she tapped the keyboard much slower than usual. "Mr. Ellis," she said, her tone now overly smooth. "I just need to confirm some details you mentioned about Fort Stewart." Raymond replied, "Fort Stewart and later Fort Bragg, retired in 2010. All my service records are in that folder." She flipped back to the discharge form once more, glancing up momentarily at this particular page. "This is very old." Raymond raised an eyebrow and said, "Ma'am, I retired 15 years ago. This form should be outdated." Melissa Cross did not reply, but instead typed something quickly. Then she cast a look toward the door as the front entrance chimed, signaling someone had arrived. 3 officers in uniform walked inside. Raymond turned just enough to catch sight of their badges and holsters, his jaw tightening. He stayed still and silent. Melissa rose swiftly and beckoned the officers over, saying softly, "In here." "That's him." One officer named Ben Trujillo approached first. He was in his early 30s with a shaved head and spoke firmly. "Sir, may I have a moment to speak with you?" Raymond nodded calmly and replied, "Of course." Trujillo continued, "We got a report that some forged documents might be involved with an account opened here." Raymond blinked slowly in response. "Is that what she told you?" Melissa said the paperwork appeared suspicious. Raymond opened the folder and handed the documents over with steady hands. "These are not suspicious. They are genuine. You can call the Department of Veterans Affairs or the Defense Department right now." Another officer flipped through the papers, while a third scanned the room. A few customers watched from the waiting area, and a man wearing a maintenance badge observed openly. Melissa folded her arms behind the officers. "I just want to make sure we aren't being scammed," she explained. "We have had issues like this before." Raymond, still seated, asked, "You mean with people like me?" Her face twitched slightly and she responded, "I didn't say that." There was no anger in his voice, only a straightforwardness that caused everyone present to pause. Officer Trujillo looked back and forth between them. "Sir, do you mind if I step outside with your documents and check in with dispatch?" "Go ahead," Raymond replied, "but I would like my folder returned afterwards." The officer acknowledged with a nod and exited the room. Melissa Cross leaned against the glass wall, arms folded, attempting to maintain her composure. Yet something was slipping away. Her confidence and her certainty. She had anticipated a confrontation, possibly even 10 minutes earlier, before the first police cruiser had turned onto Providence Road. Raymond had done something unusual. He had sent a quick text while still engaged in the conversation. The message read, "Call me as soon as possible, bank issue," and was addressed to Victor Hammond. Victor was a friend, a former superior, and someone who never ignored Raymond's messages. He was no ordinary person but a retired 4-star general, still sharp, respected, and well-connected. The men had met decades ago, serving side by side at Fort Bragg during the hardest times of their military careers. Neither time nor rank had weakened their bond. In fact, as they grew older, they talked more frequently about grandchildren, arthritis, and the strange way civilians sometimes seemed to look right through them as if they were invisible. Victor was on a video call when the text arrived. He glanced down, read the message, and without a word to the person on the screen, ended the call, grabbed his keys, and left immediately. Back at the bank, Raymond remained seated opposite Melissa Cross, who had not offered a single apology or shown the slightest sign of remorse. The officers had confirmed his identity, yet she stayed behind her glass desk with her arms folded, as if she had done nothing wrong. One officer had stepped away, while another remained by the door, but Officer Trujillo hung around, sensing the tension was still thick. "Are you all right, Mr. Ellis?" he asked softly. I have seen worse, Raymond replied. But I understand what this is. Suddenly, Melissa interrupted with a sharper tone. What do you mean? I followed protocol. I reported suspicious documents. That is my duty. Suspicious to whom? Raymond inquired. What about them seems suspicious? The age, the seal, and the fact that I am here in a windbreaker, not in a tailored suit, Melissa said, flushing. I do not appreciate being accused of anything. I did not accuse you, Raymond interjected calmly. I only asked what you saw when you looked at me. The officer shifted his posture but kept quiet. Sometimes the best approach was to let people speak their own truths. Melissa clicked her mouse on the computer, pretending to focus on her screen. But the facade was slipping. Her voice lost its rehearsed edge and grew defensive, unsettled by how swiftly the room had turned against her. I was trying to protect the bank, she muttered. No, Raymond said as he stood up. You were trying to protect an image in your mind of who you thought I was, based on nothing I actually did but solely on how I appeared when I walked in. The quiet lingered longer than expected as a few customers in the lobby stopped pretending to mind their own affairs. Phones discreetly appeared, capturing the moment Melissa Cross glanced at Officer Trujillo, seeking reassurance, yet his expression stayed impassive. I have been retired for 15 years, Raymond explained, fixing his collar. I have buried friends, led soldiers, and endured injuries in parts of my body I rarely mention. My life has been devoted to safeguarding people who would never show gratitude, and today I came in just to open an account. Nothing more. Within 15 minutes I found myself surrounded by police. Officer Trujillo responded quietly, his voice softer than before. We have handled calls like this before. Sometimes the tip is accurate. Sometimes it is not. But decisions are never made solely on instinct. That alone is insufficient. Raymond gave a slow nod, but his gaze remained locked on Melissa. That phone call could have ended differently, he said. Someone less calm, someone younger, might have reacted louder. You know what happens then? There was silence. He might end up handcuffed, face down on the floor, maybe with a knee pressing into his back. And by the time they confirm his identity was genuine, it may already be too late. Melissa stepped back slightly. I never wanted things to escalate that far. Raymond continued, but you ignited the spark. Suddenly the doorbell rang again and all heads turned. A black SUV rolled into the parking lot, gleaming and quietly precise as it slid to a stop right in front of the glass wall. The driver's door swung open, and Victor Hammond appeared, dressed formally rather than casually. Victor Hammond did not have to utter a single word as he entered the bank. His mere presence altered the atmosphere instantly. The large doors slid silently open as he strode in, tall and composed, every inch embodying his authority. He wore a uniform as if it had been crafted to fit his very frame, with medals glistening beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting of the bank. The room fell utterly silent. Conversations halted mid-sentence and even the faint buzzing of the ATM machines seemed to cease. Creating scenes was not Victor's intention. Yet this moment was not about drama. It was about showing up, about making clear who Raymond Ellis was and what he represented to those who truly understood him. Raymond remained still, just inside Melissa Cross's glass-paneled office, watching as Victor closed the distance. Officer Trujillo turned toward Victor, a mixture of confusion and curiosity evident on his face, his hand briefly resting at his belt, unsure if this visitor was here for official business or something more confrontational. Victor stopped at the threshold of the office and caught Raymond's gaze just for a brief moment, before fixing his eyes firmly on the officer's. I am General Victor Hammond, he stated calmly and with precision. That man served under my command for a total of 17 years. His credentials are authentic, and his record is beyond reproach. This treatment is utterly disgraceful. The room was so quiet that one could have heard a pin drop. Melissa's face lost all color. Her fingers that had just nervously tapped on her desk now frozen mid-air. She began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor, however, did not even glance in her direction, as Officer Trujillo cautiously stepped forward and addressed him further. We have already checked his documents. Victor's tone remained unchanged, so why is he still sitting here as if he is being questioned? The officer started to speak but paused. He had no convincing explanation. He understood that clearly everyone did. Melissa Cross clenched her jaw. I had doubts about the paperwork about potential fraud. We do encounter fraudsters sometimes. I was not trying to. Victor faced her eyes, sharp like steel. You were not trying to what? Ask questions before calling the police on a man who has never broken the law. A man with 2 tours of duty, a silver star, and more discipline in his pinky than this entire building. She blinked, struggling to regain control. I followed procedure, no, he said quietly. You followed bias. The words were not shouted but carried great impact. The customers waiting no longer pretended to be indifferent. Some began recording before Victor even arrived, but now even the tellers glanced over their shoulders, eyes wide, low murmurs spreading among them. Raymond rose steadily. General, he said softly, you did not have to come. Victor looked at him and nodded. Once, yes, I did. Officer Trujillo lowered his voice. Look, I am not here to defend anyone, but it would be best if we cleared this area. Too many onlookers, too many cameras. Melissa turned toward the door, and there she noticed 4 customers holding up their phones, filming from their laps, their hands even pretending to check messages while capturing every detail. There was no turning back now. Can we talk privately? She asked, her voice trembling. No, Raymond replied firmly. You brought this into the open, so you cannot pull it back behind closed doors just because someone important showed up. Melissa swallowed hard as Victor turned his attention to Officer Trujillo. Am I right in understanding that there is no further suspicion regarding Mr. Ellis? None at all, the officer confirmed. Victor then faced Raymond. Are you ready? Raymond gave a small nod, grabbed his folder, and placed it under his arm before stepping outside. He glanced back at Melissa. Next time someone comes in with service records, try treating them like a person first, not as a threat. Melissa remained silent. They left together, Victor maintaining a steady, measured pace, while Raymond's steps were quiet but determined. When they emerged into the sunlight, a small crowd had gathered nearby on the sidewalk. People muttered and pointed, but Raymond paid no attention. He opened the door of Victor's SUV and got in without a word. Victor stayed outside for a moment, then climbed in too. The ride back to Raymond's place was mostly quiet. Victor drove with both hands gripping the steering wheel, jaw clenched. Raymond stared out the window with the folder still resting in his lap, as if it contained a burden heavier than mere papers. Words were unnecessary between them. Their long service together made silence a space for deep thought. Did you know she was going to call the police? Victor finally questioned Raymond, but he did not respond immediately. I sensed she did not trust my words, he admitted. He was uncertain how far she would take it. Victor exhaled slowly with measured control. You are fortunate it was Trujillo and not some nervous beginner, Raymond remarked with a dry laugh. Fortunate is one way to look at it, Victor thought. They arrived at his apartment complex on Sardis Lane. It was modest and tidy, nestled beside a row of old maple trees. Victor parked beneath one of them, the engine still humming. Want me to come up? He asked. Raymond declined with a shake of his head. No, I just need a moment. Victor nodded but remained seated. Raymond opened the door, stepped out, then paused. Thank you, he said. Victor glanced his way. I did nothing extraordinary, just showed up, he replied. That alone is more than most, Raymond said as he headed toward his building, his shoulders squared and every step purposeful. He did not look back. Victor watched him leave from inside the car. After a short pause, Victor grabbed his phone. He was not very active on social media, but he knew people who were, and understood how stories like this often got buried unless someone shined a light on them. He called Nadine Rowe, an old friend turned journalist at a small independent news outlet. She covered military affairs, veterans issues, and police behavior. She never minced words. Her voice came swiftly on the line. Did not expect to hear from you in the middle of the week. I have a story, Victor said. Military, she prompted. Yes, and more, he replied. So he went on telling her about Raymond, about Melissa Cross, the call, the police arrival, and how nobody had given it a second thought. Before turning suspicion into accusation, Nadine waited quietly until he finished speaking. After a long pause, she finally inquired, Do you have Raymond's consent to discuss this? Not yet, Victor replied. But I will obtain it. Then get it quickly. This is important. He ended the call, leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, in about an hour, exhaled slowly. He was not angry. Not yet. However, a growing bitterness was taking root inside him, something stronger than mere frustration. Because this had not happened to him personally, but to someone who had always followed every rule. A man who dedicated his life to service yet was still regarded with suspicion the moment he stepped into any building holding his identification. Back upstairs, Raymond sat at his kitchen table as his phone vibrated beside his arm. His daughter Erica Jennings had called 3 times already, but he had not answered, not yet. She had cautioned him that things were different here, that although people smiled, their intent was often less genuine. That assumptions ran deep in places where people rarely voiced them aloud. Raymond was not bitter, but he was weary. At last, on the 4th ring, he picked up. "Daddy," Erica's voice was sharp and almost breathless. "I saw something online. Is it true you are all over Facebook?" "What do you mean?" "There is a video someone filmed. It shows you, a bank manager and a general walking in. Wait, was that Uncle Victor?" He rubbed his face with his free hand. "Yes." "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want to alarm you. You were surrounded by officers, and I am still here." Erica remained silent for several seconds. "Are you sure you are all right?" When Victor pulled his SUV into the parking lot the following morning, the bank was far from calm like the day before. 2 news vans stood across the street, a modest crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Phones in hand, they waited for something to unfold. Many of them were unclear about the details, only aware that a video had exploded online overnight. Now the terms veteran bank and racial profiling were trending all at once. Inside the Heritage Bank branch, the atmosphere was charged. Melissa Cross had scarcely gotten any rest. She had not anticipated the clip. Spreading so rapidly, someone in the lobby had uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "Veteran harassed at Heritage Bank. Watch what happens next." By the next morning, it had amassed more than 2 million views. At exactly 9:01 a.m., she entered her office wearing the kind of smile people put on when pretending all is fine. But it was not the regional manager Douglas Keene who awaited her. Instead, he was seated at her desk. "Close the door," he ordered. Without glancing up from the pile of printed emails before him, Melissa complied. "Is it true?" he asked without emotion. "What is true?" He finally met her gaze. "You contacted law enforcement on a highly decorated Army veteran, with no attempt to confirm his identity." Melissa felt her throat tighten. "I was simply following safety procedures. His documents were authentic." Douglas cut in. "And yet you involved the police. Instead of calling the VA." She hesitated. "I made a judgment call." He said exactly a judgment call, which is the problem. Melissa looked away, her palms growing sweaty. "Everyone makes mistakes." Douglas stood up. "Yes. And sometimes those errors cost us everything." She began to speak, but a knock on the glass cut through the moment. A teller appeared, looking pale. "Mr. Hammond is here," she announced. Douglas frowned. "Who?" "General Victor Hammond. The man from the video. He is requesting to speak with the branch manager." Melissa froze. Douglas glanced at her. "That would be you." She stood up too fast and nearly knocked over her chair. When she left the office, Victor was already standing calmly by the front desk. He wore a navy blazer this time, not a uniform, but his posture and presence remained unchanged. Melissa attempted a smile, though her cheeks twitched. "Mr. Hammond," she began. "General," he corrected her gently but firmly. "Of course," she said, extending her hand, but he did not take it. "I am here because I believe you owe my friend an apology." Melissa swallowed hard. "I understand. I just want to explain—" "No," Victor interrupted. "No explanations. What you did was wrong. You judged a man by his appearance and assumptions. You did not just cause inconvenience, you humiliated him." Her voice softened. "I never intended for it to go that far." "It is not about what you intended," he said. Douglas stepped forward then. "General Hammond, we recognize the seriousness of this matter, and the bank is currently carrying out an internal investigation." Victor nodded slowly and said that was acceptable, but clarified. "This is not just about an investigation. It is about responsibility. Raymond Ellis is a man of integrity. He does not require a public apology to understand his worth. But the community, your Clients and your team need to witness how you address errors. Melissa Cross's voice was quiet as she asked what he wanted her to do. Victor glanced around, seeing customers with phones out and attentive listeners. He said, "Be honest. Admit what occurred. Do not soften the reality, and do not act as if you would have made the same decision if the person looked different." Her lips parted slightly, but no words followed for once. She could not hide behind anything. Victor faced the main entrance, saying, "Raymond did not request that I return here. I came of my own accord because individuals like you need to be reminded that respect is earned." Raymond was not watching the news. He did not have to, as his phone constantly vibrated throughout most of the afternoon, with calls, texts, and voicemails. Some contacts were unfamiliar. Strangers expressing gratitude, veterans sharing their own struggles, even several local entrepreneurs offering services at no charge. One woman sent a digital gift card for groceries, accompanied by a note simply stating, "Thank you for your dignity." Despite all this attention, Raymond did not seek it or ask for it. All he had done was sit quietly in a chair. He spoke calmly and refused to back down when treated as if he did not belong. Now the world had made him into a symbol. Late that night, his daughter Erica knocked softly on his apartment door, carrying a grocery bag and holding her 3-year-old son. "Daddy," she said as she stepped inside, "you are on every feed right now. Have you seen the clip of General Hammond outside the bank?" "I have heard about it," he replied while taking the bag from her. "I do not need to see it. You are going viral." Raymond shook his head slightly. That is not always a good thing. She set Malik down, who quickly headed for his toy car parked in the corner. Erica moved into the kitchen and began unloading fruit and frozen dinners. "They are calling out the manager by name," she explained. "Melissa Cross. Her LinkedIn has been deleted. People are sharing screenshots. I think she has been put on leave." Raymond leaned on the counter with arms crossed. "I did not want to ruin anyone's life." "You did not," she answered. "Her actions caused this. This is accountability, Daddy. People are finally noticing." He was silent for a moment, then reached for an apple from the bag. "I just wanted a checking account." Erica looked at him softly. "I understand." Meanwhile, back at the Heritage Bank corporate office in Raleigh, the legal department was rushing. They had already received more than 150 formal complaints from the public. Within less than 2 days, local news stations were at the door, and several had asked to interview Melissa. However, Melissa Cross did not reply. She remained in her living room with the lights off and the curtains drawn. Her phone was switched off as well, somewhere buried inside her handbag. What began as a quiet confidence about fulfilling her duties had unraveled into something much harder to dismiss. She found herself repeatedly recalling the expression on Raymond's face, which was neither anger nor fear, but plain disappointment. That image haunted her deeply, because no words she offered could alter the reality. She had encountered a black man carrying military papers and immediately suspected foul play. She could attribute her reaction to her training or banking protocols, yet deep down, she understood the real reason. She had not seen him as an individual. Instead, she perceived a problem before recognizing a person. Her sister left a voicemail urging her to speak up because others were shaping her narrative, but Melissa did not know how to begin. Meanwhile, across the city, Erica was putting Malik to bed when Raymond's phone vibrated once more. He glanced at it, anticipating another random alert, but this message was from Nadine Rowe. She asked if he would agree to share his story honestly. Raymond stared at the screen for a long moment, then responded that he would, but only if the conversation was face-to-face without any scripts or manipulation, just sincerity. The following morning, Nadine arrived at his apartment carrying a notepad, a cameraman, and a single simple request to describe how it felt. Raymond took his seat at the kitchen table, the very chair he had used on the day of the event. With the same posture, he spoke not with anger or indignation, but with unmistakable honesty and clarity. Raymond had worn this persona long enough to understand what others noticed, even before he spoke. He shared, "I am accustomed to being doubted and questioned." Yet what truly unsettled him was not only his own experience, but how frequently similar situations befell others. For those without a direct line to powerful advocates, for those who raised their voices only to be silenced or worse, the struggle was ongoing. Melissa Cross nodded, allowing him to continue. He explained he never sought the spotlight. But perhaps attention found him for a purpose. The interview was broadcast that very evening without any edits, featuring only Raymond and the raw truth. As the segment circulated, public interest intensified dramatically. Within a week, the video had amassed more than 8 million views across various platforms. Unlike typical viral content, this story did not fade quickly. It kept gaining momentum. Communities began to organize local discussions addressing bias in the financial sector. Veteran groups issued statements backing Raymond and condemning the unfair treatment he had faced. A renowned news anchor described his experience as a reflection for society to examine, regardless of our comfort with what we see. At the center of these ripples, Raymond went on with his daily life. He continued to buy his morning coffee from the corner shop and still shopped at the same grocery store. The sole change was that people now recognized him. Some greeted with a wave, others with a quiet nod, and some asked to shake his hand. He welcomed everyone but never put on a performance. For Raymond, respect was something to be embodied, not displayed. It was a burden quietly carried every day while Heritage Bank plunged into crisis. Public dissatisfaction quickly morphed into worry among shareholders. A petition demanding clear reforms amassed more than 250,000 signatures. Protesters gathered outside the Charlotte branch, some holding banners with Raymond's image, others displaying slogans like, "Service deserves respect," and "Do better, Heritage." Inside the headquarters, executives convened privately. The public relations team pressed for swift action. The legal department warned about potential lawsuits. Marketing proposed a complete rebranding effort, yet none tackled the root problem. The board recognized the necessity of a public response beyond a vague message or scripted apology. On a Wednesday morning exactly 1 week following the event, Heritage Bank conducted a press conference broadcast live and covered by multiple media outlets. CEO Marilyn Vickerson stepped forward. "We are not proud of what occurred in our Charlotte branch last week," she began. "We failed a man who served this nation with honor. We neglected to treat him with basic human dignity, and we recognize that a public apology alone does not suffice." She paused, allowing the weight of the words to settle. "Effective immediately, we are initiating an independent review of our policies and procedures. Furthermore, every employee, including senior management, will participate in compulsory training on implicit bias." Customer rights and cultural awareness were at the forefront as she then gazed directly into the camera. "Mr. Raymond Ellis, we owe you more than mere words, we owe you decisive action. We hope you will grant us the opportunity to meet with you face to face." Back in his apartment, Raymond was watching the press conference with Erica sitting next to him. "She's more skilled at this than Melissa Cross," he muttered quietly. Erica laughed softly. "It doesn't take much." He did not respond, continuing to watch. Melissa Cross was absent from the conference as she had handed in her resignation 3 days prior. Whether she was forced out or left by choice remained unknown, yet her name trended online for days. Her image became a warning to many. While some showed empathy, others offered none. Raymond chose not to side with either opinion. "She made her choice," he told Nadine during a follow-up interview, "and now she must live with it, just as I have lived with that moment. She saw a problem in me instead of a human being." This incident sparked reactions well beyond Charlotte. Banks nationwide started to reassess their training practices, with some distributing internal memos reminding staff that outward appearance should never dictate trustworthiness. A handful even invited veterans to community forums to share their stories with frontline workers. Raymond received numerous emails from branch managers, but he did not seek to become a public figure, nor did he want to lead a movement or stand behind lecterns. When invitations began arriving from neighborhood committees, local media, and even national platforms, Raymond realized silence was no longer an option. Perhaps speaking out could do more good than just for himself. So, when the nearby VFW Hall invited him to address a town hall gathering about honoring veterans and public attitudes toward them, he agreed. Not because he sought praise or pity, but because he wanted to represent himself, not have others speak on his behalf. That evening the hall was full. Chairs came from storage, and people stood against the walls. Most attendees were community members, some veterans, others not. A few were bank staff from various branches, and several officers from the local police department also attended. There were no spotlight effects or sound systems, just a wooden lectern and some plastic water bottles resting on a folding table. Raymond stepped up slowly, dressed simply in a fresh button-up shirt and slacks, without his uniform or medals, just himself. He scanned the crowd before starting straightforwardly. "I am not here seeking attention," he said. "This moment, this experience, is bigger than me. It reflects how we treat one another after the uniforms come off, after titles disappear, when all that remains is the way we present ourselves in a room." The audience listened intently and silently. I did not enter that bank expecting special favors. I never wished for a red carpet. I simply wanted to be acknowledged as a person. Instead, I was reminded of what people continue to perceive when they choose not to look beyond the surface. He paused to let those words linger in the silence. I served for more than 20 years, not for accolades or celebrations, but for my comrades by my side and the nation we all call home. Yet just last week, I was treated as if I were a fraud. In a place where I should have been seen simply as a man running his errands. Some people nodded quietly in agreement, while one woman wiped tears from her eyes. But what matters even more than what happened to me is that it occurs daily to individuals who lack someone like Victor Hammond stepping in. There are countless people without a camera capturing the moment. People who face accusations, disbelief, rejection, and ultimately erasure. Raymond reached into his pocket and brought out his military identification. He raised it calmly, not for dramatic effect, but just enough so others could recognize the significance of this card to him. It is not about discounts or proving where he has served, but because it represents something he genuinely had to earn. Even holding this in his hand, he was still questioned, as if he were out of place. He slowly lowered it. "I am not angry, but I am exhausted. Exhausted from having to prove myself repeatedly, after giving more to this country than most ever will." A few people in the audience clapped quietly, but Raymond raised a hand to stop them. "I do not seek applause. I want awareness and true change, not through press statements or legally worded declarations, but through genuine moments of reflection. Moments when someone like that bank manager pauses and chooses to ask questions instead of making assumptions." A man standing near the back, also a veteran, stood up and said, "You expressed it perfectly, brother." Raymond acknowledged him with a nod, then added one final thought. "I do not require anyone to be flawless, but I do need people to truly see me before deciding who I am." The room filled with a quiet reaction, not the kind where people jump up dramatically, but the kind where they slowly rise out of respect and understanding. After the event, several attendees approached to shake his hand and offer thanks. One young bank teller in her 20s shared that his words had made a difference to her. 2 weeks later, Raymond found himself in front of a high school classroom in South Charlotte. The teacher, Miss Hallberg, had invited him after one of her students showed her a portion of his VFW speech. The class was U.S. government, composed of 25 juniors, most still waking up despite it being the third period. Some leaned back with arms crossed, and one boy in the back tapped repeatedly on his phone until Mrs. Hallberg took it away. Raymond did not attempt to capture their focus with dramatic tales. Instead, he stood close to the whiteboard with his hands in his pockets and began by asking a question. "Has anyone here ever been unfairly judged?" Several hands went up, some hesitating before raising them. "Let me guess," Raymond continued. "Someone made a judgment about you before you spoke." A few students nodded. "Now imagine that happening when you are 63, after serving your country, paying taxes, and raising children. Losing friends and still feeling like someone views you as an outsider." The room suddenly became quieter. "This happened to me a few weeks ago when I visited a bank to open a checking account. I left feeling as though half the town was staring at me. A girl in the front row tilted her head and asked, 'Why would they call the police on you if you had everything?' Raymond smiled softly and replied, 'Because sometimes people determine what is real based on what they are accustomed to seeing. If you do not fit that mold, they doubt your intentions.'" The silence in the room lingered. Some students fidgeted nervously while others focused intently. "I am not here to make anyone feel guilty," he said. "But I do want to leave you with something." Turning to the whiteboard, he picked up a marker and wrote clearly, "See the person, not the profile." "You will encounter all sorts of people in life," he continued. "They come from various backgrounds and have diverse appearances and voices. You do not need to grasp every story, but if you approach everyone with respect, you will succeed better than most adults I have met lately." A boy seated near the middle raised his hand. "Did that lady apologize to you, the bank manager?" Raymond hesitated for a moment. "No, not directly, but I did not ask for her apology. I spoke up so that the next person in my position will not be treated the way I was." Miss Hallberg stood to the side, arms tightly crossed and blinking just a bit more than normal. Raymond capped the marker and looked around once again. You all hold power that you do not even recognize. The words you choose and the space you give to others. These small actions add up in ways you cannot always see. Be the person who helps others feel noticed instead of overlooked. After the bell rang, several students lingered behind. One girl passed him a folded note with the words, "Thank you," written boldly at the top. Another approached him to shake his hand. It wasn't for show. It was heartfelt. Later, at home, Raymond sat quietly on his porch with a cup of coffee in hand. The day was calm, no breaking news, no fresh interviews, just the gentle warmth of sunlight on the wooden floorboards. Erica stopped by, accompanied by Malik, who hurried inside to grab his favorite toy truck. Erica settled on the step next to her father and said with a sip, "It has been quite a few wild weeks, hasn't it?"